Hi everyone, in this video we'll be going to study OOPS, the overview of OOPS and one concept that is classes and objects, right? So what is OOPS? OOPS is object-oriented programming. So before, if we go back in time, some years back, when OOPS was not there, we had functional programming style, right? In the functional programming, as the name suggests, we used to write functions only, the reusable pieces of code, right? So those reusable pieces of code we are using, and that's how the software used to be developed. But as we started to develop more and more complex softwares, it was more difficult to develop them with the functional programming style. So there was a need of that time to find a new programming style, and that was OOPS. So there are different concepts in OOPS like classes, objects, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, and encapsulation. So what is so special about OOPS, right? OOPS basically has analogy with real life, and that is the core speciality about OOPS. The thing is, we developed objects. Classes are basically the template or the real life entities, and objects are the instances of the class, right? For example, if we create human, right? Human is a class, right? And for example, the name of and the person, for example, the name of the person is anybody, Albert. The name of the person is Albert. Albert is the instance of the class human, and Albert is basically object, right? The class here is human and Albert is the object. So this is basically the mindset in OOPS, right? So you can see how closely it is related or analogous with the real life. So that is the specialty of OOPS. With OOPS, it's basically easy to develop more complex softwares, because the more complex softwares you develop, you have to take care about security. You have to take care about who will going to access that particular function. Basically, in a functional programming interface, any function can call any function, right? So that's not how it's doing today, right? So that's the specialty of OOPS. Instead of functions, we have classes, right? So let's move ahead. So let's study classes and objects. This is our first concept, and in this video we're going to study classes and objects, right? So what is a class? Class is basically a blueprint, right? You can say we have taken inspiration for a class from some real life entity. Class is basically an entity which is existing nowhere in the memory. Yeah, you heard me correct. Class is a real life entity which has null presence. A class alone is actually null. It has no value. It is not present in the memory anywhere. To use a class, we have to create object, right? So for example, if there is no human, no actual human in this earth, there is no concept of human, right? So to use a class comes into action when we have an object of this class, when we have an instance of this class, right? So that's basically the mindset. The class is an entity which contains data member, function, bind it together, right? And let's study some basics of a class. In a class is like a family, right? In family, we have no secrets. Everybody has access to everybody, right? In class, any function can access any function can access any data member, right? So data members means variable declared inside a class, and member functions means functions declared inside a class. So basically these are two simple terminologies, right? So for outside means a different class or an object of different class wants to call some method or a particular function, or member, or wants to access a particular data member of a particular class, then there are some things like access modifiers. So we're going to study access modifiers in a lot of detail later, but today let's just ignore it and let's focus on this class only. So here's the thing that I was saying earlier. Whenever a class is declared, nothing is assigned to the memory. Its presence is actually as good as null, right? If we cannot use the class, we can use the class only when the object of that class is created, right? So basically it is kind of a blueprint. For example, like a map. When you are going to create your own house, your own villa, right? You first create a map of that. Then that map, you can say map is a class, and the instance of that map, basically your villa, is your object, right? You can make as many number of houses with the help of that map. That map is a class. That villa, your house, or whatever you want to call it, is called your object, right? So this is the syntax of a class. The class is a reserved keyword, just like int and void, and the naming convention is you have to put first alphabet as capital, right? Here sample class, right? This is the data member, and this is the member function. This member function can access this data member, right? So here in this member function, it's doing nothing, it's just printing the variable, and we are giving that variable from outside. It's just an argument, right? So let's come to the object. Object is basically when a class is actually created in the memory, some memory is assigned to that class, right? So let's go back to this example. Here, if we create an object of this class, right, this much amount of memory is assigned. No memory is assigned for the function. The function is still kind of a blueprint, because function don't consume memory at the compile time. They consume memory in the runtime, right? So the memory is assigned here, 4 bytes of memory. For int, it's I guess 4 bytes. So 4 bytes of memory is assigned. But for function, it's still a blueprint. You can use the function. It will consume memory at the runtime, but not at the compile time. So that's the thing. And yeah, objects are real, and class is the blueprint of the object. Like when a class is just a map, objects is basically an instance, a real entity, right? And to declare an object, we have a very simple interface in C++. It's class name and object name. For example, there's a human name. If we call it Albert, Albert is the instance of the class human, right? Then how can Albert access all the methods of speech, speaking, listening, feeling, all the things? How can Albert access of the class human? So to access this, we have two things. Number one, the dot operator, and number one, the arrow operator. I guess you already know the arrow operator, because arrow operators are used in pointers, right? When you use structures, we use arrow operators, right? So we'll not be going to study arrow operators in detail in this video. Our most focus will be on the dot operator, because dot operator is the thing we haven't studied yet, right? So dot operator is used when the object is calling some function or a data member, right? So let's understand it. For example, it's a car, right? The car must have a name, and the model, whatever you want to call it, let's take it as a string only, right? So see, the first word is capital, right? So this is the access modifier, just ignore it. The string name, string model, and there is a member function, right? The print name, it will just print the name of this class car, right? So here's our main function. We have created an object of this class. If you can notice, this is the class and this is the object, right? So we have again used the dot operator to access the name data member. We want to access here, we want to access this. This object will access the name with the help of dot operator, and we have assigned it to the name BMW, right? We can assign it to anything you want, and we are just printing. Here also we are just, actually it doesn't make sense actually, because the function is already printing, right? So car.print name, the car is actually calling the function print name here. It's actually calling the function print name, and it's executing, because actually in this object car, the name is BMW. In the print name, when it's calling, it's just executing that function. this dot print name. Now you will say where the name came from. We haven't declared anything in the class, and if forgetting, the class is actually nothing. It's all about objects, right? And in the object car, we have already declared the name of the car as BMW, and this is the name, and it's printing that name to be BMW only, right? So let's move to member function declaration. So member function declaration, we have two ways to declare member function in the from the inside answer. Also we can declare the outside of the class using scope resolution, but we will see the scope resolution and all these fancy things later, right? So just focus on the basics right now. This is the ending. Let's do some practical, right? Where is my code blocks? Here it's my code blocks. I think you have already installed code blocks. You should basically, because programming is all about practice, right? So let's first save this as sample class. BITS slash this is our namespace standard, and the class is actually human, right? So in the class human, declared everything is public, just ignore it, right? And the string is name, right? It's age, and let's declare some member functions, right? Member functions, and the member function should be like print name. This function will do nothing, just print the name, right? The name of the person. The arrow operator is functioning just like we used to do in structures, right? So nothing fancy here. So this is our main function, and Albert dot, before printing we should assign it, right? So Albert dot name obviously will be Albert, right? And that's the thing, we are using dot operators to print the things and return 0. As simple as that. The program is simple, it should execute. See, the name is Albert. Here let me explain it. We created a class human. Till now, if I'm printing something, till before this line, nothing is assigned in the memory, and after this line, this whole thing is assigned in the memory. This whole thing, especially this thing, right? These two things are assigned in memory. This is still a blueprint, and no memory is assigned during the time of compilation. And after that, Albert.name is Albert, right? So the name, this thing is assigned as Albert, and we are just printing the name, right? So as simple as that. So this is our simplest example. This is one of the most simple example that will be using. There are more concepts in classes and objects like constructors, encapsulation, abstraction. That is, you should understand all of these things in a great detail. If you have any doubt, then just clear those doubts right now, right? And we'll see you in the next video.